Hello and welcome to the Idiot Book Nook. My name is Blazewing. My pronouns are they, them.
I am the reading dragon, and my pronouns are she, her.
My name's Lady Punnet. My pronouns are primarily she, her, sometimes they, them. Today is a she, they. I cut out again, didn't I?
You're good. We'll make do.
Fuckers.
We're getting into an episode of Tongues, Tangents, and Tittilations today. Today we're doing episode 7, and the topic we have chosen to talk about is why the English language fucking sucks. This is an kind of off-the-cuff topic, something we came up with after we logged in this morning on Twitch, so we hope you enjoy whatever shit show this turns out to be. But first, if you'd like to follow along on our social media, you can do so at lanktr.ee/ thanks phone. You can do so at lanktr.ee/ Idiot Book Nook. You'll be able to find links to our podcast, to the YouTube. You'll be able to find links to our Twitch and to all of our individual socials. And you'll be able to follow along and see what kind of projects we're getting up to on our own personal socials all around there. With that being said, we bring you what we affectionately call Triple T. Tongues, Tangents, and Tittilations.
So I got one for anyone who went through elementary school. I'm sure all of us are familiar with the ye old phrase, I before E, except after C. I have an addendum to that. I before E, except when your foreign neighbor Keith receives 8 counterfeit beige sleighs from feisty caffeinated weightlifters. Also, I before E, except after C, another theory disproved by science.
How weird? Absolutely, Night Orchid. The English language is one of the hardest languages on the face of this planet to learn.
Yes.
It's because English has its like base syntax based in multiple languages. We are the language that took other languages out back of the school and beat them up for their lunch money.
We also incorporate other languages into our own.
Yeah, every once in a while, for those of us that are neurodivergent, every once in a while you might come across a word that just sounds weird. And it just keeps getting weirder and weirder, or sounding weirder and weirder the more you repeat it. It's because that language doesn't follow the rules of the rules that you're probably used to, or the rules that should follow for words in that sentence, or something along those lines. English is a mishmash? I think that's the word I want.
Hot pot?
Yeah, you know what? Hot pot works. English is absolutely a hot pot, a melting pot of different
clusterfuck.
Languages. Clusterfuck. That also works. And it's no wonder people coming in and learning English as a second language have a lot of issues with it, because there's so many little rules. There are so many nuances with the English language. Even native English speakers have a hard time with it. Like people who grew up
there,
speaking English.
There, and there.
Yeah, like the 3 there's. Although if you really want to piss off grammar Nazis, you could combine all 3 spellings of there and put it into one word. THEI.
You see this? Yes. You see this? You see this? Fuck you!
THEIY apostrophe RE.
Fuck you!
For those of you listening to the podcast, Dragon currently has her middle finger up at the mention of there, and there. Also, the verb dispense means both give and to accept from having.
I actually found
Also,
an example phrase. Hold on. Let me pull it up real quick. Sorry. Words with the same spelling can have different pronunciations. For English pronunciation, context and parts of speech matter greatly. Sentences like, it's time to present her the present, have the same word present, present, twice, but are pronounced differently each time.
I actually have a few sentences like that if the chat would allow me. The bandage was wound around the wound. The farm was used to produce produce. The dump was so full it had to refuse or refuse. We must polish the Polish furniture. 1 second. The soldier decided to desert his desert in the desert. Since there was no time like the present, he thought it was time to present the present. A bass was painted on the head of the bass drum. When shot at, the dove dove into the bushes. I did not object to the object. And let's not even get started on words that look like they should rhyme, but they don't.
Just because of the way that it's pronounced. Oh my god. And then words that have silent letters.
Yes. The silent letters is the worst. Like, it's more prevalent in the French language. They could probably, like, explain a few of them. But, like, hold on. Let me look up a few that look like.
So I actually
So
have.
aid.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, a good one is aid and said. Should be the same thing, right? All you're doing is adding an S to the front, but no, it's two different things. Along with plaid. Or all and shall. Or a lot or ballot.
Well, there's all and shall, but if you pronounce shall like all, so you have shall, it completely changes the meaning of the word and the spelling. Shawl is spelled S-H-A-W-L.
Okay. All right. Explain this one. Anger and badger.
Because you're adding another letter for badger. B-A-D-G-E-R.
Oh, wait, sorry, no. Danger. These ones do
Anger
rhyme.
and
What the
danger, I think is what you were looking for.
Yeah.
I actually have an article. Go ahead.
Last one. Ballot, wallet. No, wait. Ballet and wallet.
Yeah. It's because ballet, I believe, is French.
It is. Stupid French.
I have an article that was written or that was posted by the BBC here in 2015, June 8th. I'm going to go ahead and post this in the chat. And I want to read this out. You may have seen a poem by Gerald Noel Trinité called Chaos. It starts like this. Dearest creature in creation, studying English pronunciation, I will teach you in my verse sounds like corpse, core, horse, and worse. In its fullest version, the poem runs through about 800 of the most vexing spelling inconsistencies in English. 800 of them. This article was penned by James Harbeck. Attempting to spell in English is like playing one of those computer games where, no matter what, you will lose eventually. If some evil mage has performed vile magic on your tongue, he should be bunged into gaol for his nefarious goal. And if you still need convincing of how inconsistent English pronunciation is, just read that last sentence out loud. But no, our spelling came to be a capricious mess for entirely human reasons. The problem begins with the alphabet itself. Building a spelling system for English using letters that come from Latin, despite the two languages not sharing exactly the same set of sounds, is like building a playroom using an IKEA office set, but from Tlingit to check many other languages that sound nothing like Latin do well enough with versions of the Latin alphabet. So, what happened with English? It's a story of invasion, thefts, sloth, caprice, mistakes, pride, and the inexorable juggernaut of change. In its broadest strokes, these problems come down to people, including you and me, dear readers, being greedy, lazy, and snobbish. Night Orchid says, I heard somewhere that the French scribes used to get paid by the letter, so they just crammed extra ones in whenever they thought they could get away with it. I am actually unsure about that, but that is an interesting thought, and I may have to look further into that. Invasion and theft. First, the greed. Invasion and theft. The Romans invaded Britain in the 1st century AD and brought their alphabet in the 7th century. The Angles and Saxons took over along with their language. Starting in the 9th century, Vikings occupied part of England and brought some words, including they, displacing the Old English hi. And then the Norman French conquered in 1066 and replaced much of the vocabulary with French, including words over time, which words over time became beef, pork, invade, tongue, and person. Once the English tossed out the French, but not their words, a few centuries later, they started to acquire territories around the world: America, Australia, Africa, India. With each new colony, Britain acquired words: hickory, budgerger, zebra, bungalow. The British also did business with everyone else and took words as they went, something we call borrowing, even though the words were kept. Our language is a museum of conquests. What does this have to do with spelling? When we borrow words, they often come from other Latin alphabet spelling systems, but have different sounds from the words we make in English. Many other languages, therefore, fully adapt words they borrow. Norwegian turned chauffeur into safor. Finnish turned strand into ranta. And in English, though, we wear our battle scars proudly. For some words, we've adopted pronunciation but modified the spelling. Galosh, strange. For others, we didn't change the spelling, but we did change the pronunciation. Ratio, sauna, and ski. Or we kept the spelling and, to the extent reasonable, the pronunciation too. Core, ballet, pizza, and tortilla. This article does go on for, a few more paragraphs, but it does at least somewhat of a decent job outlining how some of our words came to be and why English seems to be such a mishmash in probably no more than, I want to say, 1,000 to 1,500 words. It's pretty succinct and pretty in-depth for the length of the article itself. English vexes me.
It's weird.
It seriously vexes me because as somebody who grew up learning English as my first language, there are words even I don't know how to spell because the rules are so fucking complicated.
The English language has also changed several times throughout the course of history as well.
Yes.
And the changes that are happening to it now, from what we are seeing, and I believe a lot of people will agree, the changes in the English language are happening a lot faster now since the birth of the internet as well, and the birth of internet connection, connecting everybody from around the world to each other.
Well, that actually brings... Sorry, go ahead.
Because like how we talked about earlier, the English language is a whole melting pot clusterfuck of so many other languages from around the world. And with the birth of the internet and social media and connecting people from one end of the globe to the other, that those changes, the influences from other parts of the world, other cultures, other languages to affect the English language has been happening a lot quicker nowadays.
That is actually a really good point to bring up, and ties in really nicely to linguistic anthropology, which a few of my friends have studied. I have a passing understanding of it, but as a communications person, language is, doesn't matter what language you speak, but English I want to say English not above all, but language is constantly in flux. It's constantly changing. Just because we use it at the moment, we use certain words at the moment, doesn't mean those words won't change. We are actually able to now before we were able to watch that over kind of generations and how speech changed over entire generations. We'd have to document and then leave other people to, finish our work. But with the advent of the internet and the speed at which communication is had now because of the internet, we're able to watch this in the span of our lifetimes. 20, 30 years ago, LOL didn't exist. Raffle didn't exist. Text speak didn't exist. You weren't able to talk in emojis because emojis didn't exist.
Not in the way that they exist now.
We are actually able to watch kind of the evolution of language, and we are watching entirely new languages being born because of the advent of the internet.
I kind of want to touch again on like the whole emoji language thing and the GIF language. Technically, the only other time that we've seen occurrences like that where images are primarily used as a way of communication was in hieroglyphs and pictographs from like Egypt and some of the caves in the like all across the globe.
The thing with,
so hieroglyphs and pictographs.
The thing with pictograms and hieroglyphs is, if I understand correctly, they represent ideas or thoughts, and in order to understand them, you have to understand the context behind them and the society in which they were written, right? But it just goes to show, like, language changes. If you go back 500 years, you go to England 500 years ago, you wouldn't be able to understand anything anybody's saying. They use completely different words. It's a completely different language. There's old, mid, and modern English, and eventually that'll change, and they'll call modern English something else. They'll call it like they'll call English later on down the line like postmodern or something. But we've been able to watch, like I said, the change of the language in real time because of the advent of the internet, instead of it taking like entire generations. Slay, fleek, or on fleek. These are words that...
Yas queen.
Yas queen, yeah. These are all phrases and words that didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago and have worked now into our dictionary and our vocabulary on an almost daily basis, to the point where the dictionary is now adding them.
And with existing words as well, we've actually had influences to create new meanings and new fluctuations for existing words, such as the term nope.
Yep.
Big nope.
Yep. We've been changing, absolutely, we've been changing entire definitions of words as language evolves. There's one other form of communication that's kind of come up in the last 20 to 30 years, and it was extremely popular and is, for the most part, still popular amongst millennials. And that's speaking in GIFs. Moving pictures, like short moving pictures, to promote an idea or a thought in a context that only people who have seen, the full scope of that small clip, like maybe it's a clip from a movie or a clip from a TV show. Only people who've seen that TV show will get it, unless the context is wide enough or the pop culture knowledge is wide enough that everybody understands that moment.
They also are used to visually express an emotion because of the fact that us millennials and then zillennials and Gen X, who have been like more heavily integrated into like the birth of the internet and texting and keeping up with technology, like the rest of us younger folk. GIFs were a real good way for everyone to try to better convey what someone was meaning when in a text conversation, because of the fact that we had noticed so many problems with communicating what we were trying to say just through text and things getting lost in translation, so to speak. So someone is having a conversation over text with, like, say, their significant other, and they say something to the other person without meaning to sound standoffish or insulting or whatever, but the person receiving that text message can totally misread it if they do not have anything to contextualize what emotion is being presented through that text. Because in the English language, at least in my opinion, we cannot just communicate on the letters and the words alone. It is because of how we talk to each other and how we use the words that will basically result in what type of interactions we have. I would say that's one of the major reasons why the English language is so hard, is because at least we Americans, or in North Americans, Canadians, whatever, over here, those that speak English as their first language, we also speak with a lot of emotion, or lack thereof.
Yep. I can say one thing in a tone, it'll mean one thing, and if I say something in another tone, it'll mean something completely different. For instance, fuck you. Depending on the tone of my voice, it can either mean get fucked, go away, I don't want to see you or hear from you, or it could mean how dare you, it could mean how dare you, that was a hell of a joke.
Or you're just like having a fun gist with another person, like fuck you.
Yep.
Like you're in the middle of a laugh with someone and they just like kind of do a joking call out to you. It's like, how dare you, fuck you.
32 years ago, just kind of circling back around to a thought here for a second. 32 years ago, there was an episode of Star Trek that aired called Darmok. More commonly known among Trekkies as a simple phrase, Darmok Gelada Tanagra. This episode, the Enterprise shows up on a planet. I can't remember the reason why, but Captain Picard ends up beaming down to this planet, ends up getting trapped or something like that, and ends up with a member of another species that speaks extremely cryptically. And they cannot, for the life of them, the Federation for the life of them, cannot figure out how this culture communicates. Nobody can understand them. At the end of the episode, they figure out this species speaks through examples of cultural context. So this is 1991 we are talking about. Darmok and Gelada Tanagra, Temba, his arms wide. They were talking about meme culture well before meme culture was established. We saw the evolution, we saw the birth and the evolution of that in real time. But Star Trek was talking about it in 1991.
I have another example. Okay, so you were talking about this, and it reminded me. The first live-action Transformers movie, Bumblebee, his voice box was actually broken, so he had to improvise on how he could communicate with everybody, human and Autobot alike. He was using his radio to bring in different radio waves and different radio stations and mixing it all together to try to formulate the words that he was trying to say. And that was his way of communicating, much like a ghost box.
Yep.
That people use for ghost hunting.
Yep.
Because what ghost boxes are is a kind of like a not. I don't want to use radio scrambler because I don't think that's the right term, but it's basically just going through the different radio waves and radio stations and letting the quote-unquote spirit use that little ghost box to pick from the different radio wavelengths to formulate the sentence that they are trying to say.
Yep.
Or answer that they're trying to, give.
Lady Punnet, you've been pretty quiet.
Well, I'm just trying to think of other examples while also trying to stop my cat from eating me. So another example I'm thinking of when English language or any languages is interpreted. So when you mentioned the whole Star Trek thing, it made me think of a Star Trek episode where there was a language miscommunication, because I don't remember what generation it was. I don't remember what season. But what I do remember was they had this person come on the ship with 3 different interpreters. And they spoke through a telepathic link. And the first thing was, you talk to me, you do not talk to them. They are there as my voice, but nothing else. But then something happened to the 3 interpreters, so then he could only communicate with them through sign language. So Data needed to learn basically all the sign language in the universe so that he would be able to communicate and be like the interpreter for this. And that is actually a thing that happens often in the deaf community, because not enough sign language, unfortunately, isn't something that's often, and even if it is, there's different dialects. Like, there's American Sign Language, there's British Sign Language, they're basically everywhere. And even then, there's different dialects of different sign language. Like, even from home to home. Like, CODA, children of deaf adults, often have, like, their own language within the home that they use for different things. Similar to how people with autism or ADHD will have names for things, like thingamabobs, doohickeys, the grabby thing. Things like that.
So the episode that you're talking about is actually Season 2, Episode 5, titled Loud as a Whisper. It's the 5th episode of the 2nd season. Let's see here. Without spoiling too much, the Federation Starship Enterprise is commanded by Captain Jean-Luc Picard is set to take aboard Riva, a renowned negotiator to help resolve a centuries-old war between 2 tribes on planet Soleus 5. Riva is deaf due to a hereditary lack of gene for hearing in the royal family, using sign language and lip reading, but travels with a chorus, an entourage in telepathic communication with him who are able to enunciate his thoughts. He dismisses the Enterprise crew's briefing on the history of the conflict, explaining that the dispute has long since become personal, regardless of tangible concerns that may have stated it. When Riva, his chorus, and several Enterprise officers beam down for a meeting, one tribal delegate fires, killing the chorus, and then Data is brought in to basically told, you have to learn this shit. Behind the scenes, Howie Sago, who is deaf, approached the show's producers with the idea of a deaf mediator. The initial idea came from his wife, who is a fan of Star Trek. The writers originally wanted Sago's character to learn to speak after his chorus is killed, but Sago was opposed to the idea as it could perpetuate the practice of forcing deaf children to speak, and the producers were understanding of his concerns and wrote an entirely new draft. Yeah.
I'm starting to like the whole production crew of Star Trek more and more.
So, kind of going off on a side tangent here, Star Trek has been extremely progressive for its time. It always has been. They've come up with ideas and thoughts well ahead of the rest of society. They've dealt
especially influencing today's technologies.
Yeah, in technology, absolutely. There was another episode, Outcast. They dealt with actual gender issues in like the very early 90s. It remains one of my favorite episodes of TNG of all time because of how they dealt with that. But Star Trek has paved the way for, I think, a lot of things. It's paved the way for a lot of the way we look at communication and whatnot. There are, however, a lot of areas where English language absolutely misses out on, because it's not a language that evolved naturally, or it's not a language that evolved innately. It basically borrows and takes what it wants from other languages in order to complete itself. There are certain ideas and concepts that English can't actually understand. There's a phrase in Japanese. Give me 1 second. I think
There's a few phrases in Japanese.
Yes, thank you. What is the shortened version of that?
What's the version you're looking at now?
Hang on a second. So it's a phrase in Japanese that means it cannot be helped or nothing can be done about it. And the phrase is shikata ga nai. Basically, you can't help it. You can't do anything about it. There's also a phrase for... One second.
There's a phrase in Japanese that literally means the light that goes through leaves and forests.
Yep. Kuchisabishi in Japanese. I think I pronounced that right. Kuchisabishi. What it translates to in English, I'm not hungry, but my mouth is lonely. Taken in another way, it could mean like stress eating, or it could be just I need something to do with my mouth. It's like an oral fixation type deal, right? I need something around the mouth. Let's see here. HuffPost did an article on it. A term which means lonely mouth speaks to why many on lockdown have been snacking more than ever. Longing to have or put something in one's mouth.
I think it's the... I want to say it's Norwegian has the word for when you're too hot, so you have to like move it around in your mouth until it cools down.
Let's take a look. 1 second. For something too hot. So have to move it around.
It's too darn hot. It's too darn hot.
I don't know how to pronounce that.
Isn't there like a little speaker icon that can pronounce it for you?
1 second. That's more than a few words for that phrase, it looks like.
Ah.
There's words in German? Is it? No, it's not German. It's a Nordic country.
Finnish?
Might be.
Or is it Polish?
The phrase or word, I can't remember if it's a phrase or a word, but it essentially comes down to, this is the person I don't hate as much as I hate everyone else.
I believe it is, let me look that up real quick.
But the point is, because of the way the English language came to be, there are certain ideas that it can't encapsulate or that it doesn't have words for. And there's certain emotions you can't express in English. One of my go-tos has been, English doesn't have the words I need to express what I am feeling or what I am seeing. Like, the English language fucking sucks. It doesn't do what I need it to do.
I find that also happens like when you're trying to explain an emotion you're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't explain the emotion, you're just feeling it, and you have to say, it's... Okay, so it's like I'm angry, but I'm not angry, but I'm also hungry, but I know I just ate, and it's also like a little bit of sadness, but I have nothing to be sad about.
Hangry is a word that has been developed in recent days, in recent years.
I know.
I
just...
get that. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just an example I'm thinking of.
No, I get that. just the English language is fucking weird, man. Like, it is fucking weird. And this is coming again from somebody who grew up speaking English. I wish we had ways to express certain thoughts and ideas, which we don't, simply because of the way English developed. I don't know.
English is weird.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. We keep beating around that same kind of thought or idea. English is fucking weird.
The worst part is, like you said, it's a hot pot of all of these different languages. So for the most part, a lot of our language comes from Latin, and we still use a lot of Latin today, like when we do things about anatomy or science or medicine.
Absolutely.
Or
the word trans and cis, for example, when you're talking about medical issues with the gender nonconforming population versus the gender conforming population, which there's a lot of pushback. We're seeing we're seeing English words take on kind of not new meanings, but being applied in new contexts where they weren't used before.
exactly. And there's also people with the lack of knowledge about certain English things, like the people who are pushing back on how I don't want to use pronouns. And then you have the people who are like, okay, so what do I call you then?
Yeah. The lack of understanding about basic taxonomy?
I think that's the word.
About basic taxonomy and the way the English language works is insane. People are arguing over fundamental parts of the English language without which those parts without which like our entire language would fall apart. Not using pronouns like I, we, he, her, they're all pronouns. And without those basic words, our entire language starts to fall apart.
So the phrase that translates to I don't hate you as much as I hate everybody else. I can't find the actual phrase, but what I am finding, because my phone is being a fucking shit right now, it may be Finnish or Scandinavian.
Yeah. It's one of the Scandinavian countries that uses that. I'm going to have to actually confer with one of my Swedish friends and see if she can track it down.
I think it might actually be Swedish or something like that. I don't know.
One of my Swedish friends on TikTok. I'm gonna have to ask her about it. She has a basic understanding. I also need to pick up my Swedish again. I've been trying to learn Swedish on and off with Duolingo. I haven't really had much in the way of success, but at least I think it's the grammar remains somewhat the same, or the basic layout of a sentence remains the same, which is a whole other fucking issue. You've got languages like Latin, English, Spanish. You just translate it. It's literally just rote memorization. You memorize the words and then you substitute in most cases, in generic cases, I am generalizing here for a moment. It's rote memorization. You take the words, you memorize them, and then you replace them in the sentence where the English words are. Then you've got languages like Japanese, where the entire sentence structure has changed. So instead of, I'm eating an apple, in Japanese, your sentence structure is something along the lines of, I am an apple eating. So the subject of your sentence comes first, the action comes next, and then the object, or what you're talking about, comes after that. It's fucking weird.
That sometimes happens in the German language too, I'm finding, because I'm learning German through Duolingo.
Yeah.
And a lot of one of the major ways that their sentence structure is, because the German language is actually quite literal. And so when you're like speaking your sentences and whatnot, more often than not, when you do a direct translation of what the German phrase or the German sentence is, it's literally just a how do I put it? It's a literalization of what is being said. Like, Oh, what's a good example? Let me pull it up real quick.
I'm actually looking up examples of descriptive
Yeah, literal.
sentence structures.
Yeah, the German language is kind of like literal descriptions of shit.
Because I find you can often tell when you're reading something that's written and tell who is a native English speaker, non-native English speaker, because so you know how when we describe somebody, so for example, my baby brother is a very tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. That way. However, so there's a certain way you describe somebody, but someone who's and we all follow the same structure. We usually start with like an overall description, then slowly go down to the finer details. Some people who are not native speakers go, oh, she has a brother with blonde hair, blue eyes, but somewhat tall. Things like that. And although it's the same thing, it doesn't sound quite right because we're used to having a certain way of speaking. Even if it's a subconscious thing.
All right, here's an example for the German language being a little bit more literal. The English phrase is, do you have time this evening? In German, it's hast du heute Abend Zeit? When you do a direct translation, have you tonight time? Have you tonight time? They also switch the words around a little bit. So nearly half the time, your phrases in direct translation are almost backwards in order of placement compared to the English language.
And then there's the whole issue of things like metaphorical sentences. When you take them literally, like you could be saying something to mean one thing, the intended meaning, versus the literal meaning. So, she's a hoot, he's a riot, she's a ray of sunshine, for instance. All meant, she's a ray of sunshine. This person is kind of lighthearted, easygoing, pleasure to be around. But if you take that literally, like, just imagine that for a moment. She's a laughing hyena. Using one rather crass, they're a chick magnet.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually something that Whisper and I do quite a lot. Is one of us will say, "Oh, your camera went weird, Dragon."
Oh no! It's hexadecimal!
Am I okay?
She's taking over the mainframe again!
No, like, we can hear you, but your camera went all weird.
Now there's a reference.
One of my
there's a reference for people.
One of my favorite things to do with Whisper is we'll be having a conversation, and then one of us will go off on a complete tangent. We'll take something that was stated, and we will intentionally misinterpret the way that it's supposed to be said, or the way that it's meant to be heard, or the way that it's supposed to be interpreted for something else that is a lot more humorous. And we'll basically just keep carrying on a conversation from there and just see where the road takes us. And it leads us to some really amazing places at some point, which on Facebook is where my whole conversations with series came from. Just, I don't know. The way that English works is fucked, effectively. The amount of work needed to be able to properly understand. There's so many levels to it. Again, I come back to my point of, it's no wonder that people who are learning English as a second language have so many fucking issues with it. So, and of course, when you break it down, you know, your nouns, your pronouns, your adjectives, your qualifiers, your contractions.
Nouns.
Yeah, all of that. Like, each one has a specific...
Do you know how annoying nouns are? Nouns are so annoying because it's like it's an important person, place, or thing, but to me, all things are important, but apparently only certain important things get capital letters, so I can't put capital letters in front of shiny rocks, even though shiny rocks are very important. Let me put my capital letters on shiny rocks.
Is there anything else we want to kind of bring up on this topic?
Good point, because if you let me, I will go on a very long time about my hatred of noun rules. And that could be a whole different subject. As a matter of fact, for anyone, which that is actually a thing you can purchase using bits to watch me go on a 1-minute tirade about a topic of your choosing. Insert shameless click thingy here.
Is there anything else we want to bring up kind of on this topic?
Nothing I can think of off the top of my head besides my hatred of...
The hatred of what?
My hatred of nouns.
Gotcha.
The
And noun
plural
rules.
versions of words.
Pardon?
Plurals! Plural words! Oh my god, there are so many for plurals, like moose is the plural of moose, but for mouse, the plural is mice. Or for a goose, the plural is geese.
Again, I think
Who decided this?
I think it comes back to the back to where the words were actually taken from.
Yep, that's what I was saying earlier. Okay, so the plurals of words, this whole bit that almost became a tangent just now. This is how we came to deciding what our topic of triple T was going to be on today.
Yep. On that note, I think this is a good place to wrap up this conversation. There's a lot more that can be said on this topic, but we don't have, unfortunately, the research behind us at the moment. We don't have the information behind us at the moment to keep talking about this. I think this is kind of just a cursory look, kind of just a gentle conversation on it. That being said, we want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here on the Idiot Book Nook and Tongues, Tangents, and Tittilations for episode 7, The English Language Sucks, and the rabbit holes that we go down, the discussions that we have. We very much appreciate all of our listeners, anybody who's had any input in the chat. It means the world to us that people actually sit here and listen to us just talk. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so at linktr.ee/idiotbooknook. You'll be able to find links to our podcast, to our YouTube, to our Twitch, which we are live on Wednesday mornings at the moment, and you'll be able to find links to all of our individual socials, so should you want to go see what projects we're up to on our own. But for episode 7 of the Idiot Book Nook, featuring, Tongues, Tangents, and Tittilations, featuring the Idiot Book Nook, I'm Blazewing.
I am the Reading Dragon.
I'm Lady Punnet.
And we'll see you next episode.